Hello, and welcome to this fourth lecture on the world of work. Today we are going to focus on racial discrimination in the workplace. Why are we talking about this? Just have a look at this poll. The New Zealand General Social Survey asked New Zealanders whether they felt discriminated against over the past year. 1 in 10 people aged 15 or over reported experiencing some form of discrimination in the last 12 months. This equates to an estimated 340,000 New Zealanders. The graph here shows the reason why people felt discriminated against. To be counted as having experienced discrimination, respondents had to report that they'd been treated unfairly or had something nasty done to them because of the group they belonged to or seemed to belong to. Respondents could choose as many reasons as they thought relevant. The survey went on to underline that quite clearly this discrimination was most common in employment situation. Okay, so the first reason is skin color, race, ethnicity, or nationality. Okay, that's the main reason for discrimination. Okay, dress or appearance might also be linked to racial discrimination, if you think about it, just religious beliefs, etc. And we're talking about this because it is an issue. In all the countries that we study, there is some anti-discrimination legislation, and in all of them there's a part that is about racial discrimination. Okay, some have gone further than others with affirmative action measures, like the United States. But here is a list of the legislation, so you can see that in all the countries you have something. In Australia, we've got the Racial Discrimination Act of 1975. In Canada, the Canadian Multiculturalism Act of 1971. New Zealand, the Human Rights Act of 1993, so much later. The United Kingdom, Race Relations Act of 1968, and there were several of those. In the United States, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Okay, so the issue in the United States was even more prevalent than in the other countries, and that's why the legislation was passed earlier than the other countries. And you also have, you might think that it comes a little bit late, 1975, 1971, 1968, but what you need to keep in mind is, for instance, if you take the example of the United Kingdom, there were approximately 30,000 non-whites in Britain after World War II. Only 30,000. That's not much, okay? While in 2011, you had more than 6 million people who are categorized as non-whites, okay? Of course, we'll talk about this. You need to take into account the diversity within the ethnic minority groups. But here you see that racial discrimination is a problem. It doesn't solve itself. You need the intervention of the government, and even with this intervention, there are still problems today. All the countries we've mentioned have diverse population. What differs from France is that because of their multicultural policies, those countries have what we called ethnic statistics. For instance, you see here in in the United States. That's a pie chart that was published by the United States Census Bureau in 2016. The population of the United States is divided into several categories. It is not the case in France. You do not have such statistics because we are supposed to form one nation that cannot be divided into subgroups. Right, so you see how they're divided in the US: Black, African or American, American Indian and Alaska Native, Asian, Hispanic or Latino, and you've got very small there with Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander. With 62% of the population between being white, not Hispanic or Latino. Okay? And you see also with the type of tables that they publish, you see the issues they have. For instance, in the US, it's the fact that the Hispanic population is represents an increasing part of the population. Okay. In Canada, you see the term that is used. It's also interesting to compare the terms. Okay, they've got different terms in different countries. They use the term visible minority. You got about 84% of the population that's white, and then you've got different groups there. And what you can see is that while they're going to have one group that's called black, for the Asian groups, you've got different subcategories: South Asian, Chinese, Filipino, Southeast Asian, West Asian. And here you see that probably in Canada, the challenge that they have is with Asian communities. Okay, so you can infer the different challenges of the different nations. This is for Ireland. Here you've got also 84% of the population that's white, 86% for England and Wales, because as you know, Northern Ireland and Scotland have their own censuses. And you see that in England and Wales, you've got very simple categories. Okay, white, mixed, multiple ethnic groups, Asian, Asian British, Black African, Caribbean, Black British, other ethnic groups. Okay, so from this slide, you see that you've got very diverse population, but you also see that they do not use the same labels to talk about the different groups. And that's one of the main problem I had with these lectures, because for the lecture on women in the workplace, it was easy. It's easy to find that data on women and men. It's much more complicated to find data on ethnic groups. And of course, there are multiple of reasons for that. If you think about it, let's stop at the vocabulary. I have used the term racial discrimination here. As you all know, there aren't different human races. There are different groups with different skin colors and minor physical differences, but there is one single human race. So it's difficult here, okay? There are problems of definition. With racism, what does it do? It categorizes the other as inherently different and typically inferior. It involves the disadvantageous treatment of the other, whether intentionally or not. What we're going to try and do here is to explain how this racism manifests itself at work. So here you have the problems with the term race. And then you've got the other more accepted term of ethnicity. Ethnicity refers to cultural rather than physical or allegedly natural differences between groups. So there's no denying that many groups are discriminated against because of their cultural attributes, their religion, for instance, rather than their skin color or their apparent physical differences. Okay, so the first problem here with this lecture is definition. What are we going to talk about? So because of this, it's very difficult for me to talk about the different countries, so I'm mainly going to focus on Britain. Okay. Right, so let's see what goes on in Britain. So in Britain, the statistics, the Office of National Statistics divides the different ethnic groups as such, so as we've seen. And what is obvious to all of you is that the employment rate for whites is much higher than for the other ethnic groups. Okay, you see the difference there, about a 10-point difference. So what we're going to do now, we're going to focus on the hiring process and how it might explain this difference in employment rates. Okay.